are once again talking about the Constitution line by line. We're still in the 14th Amendment. I'm Don Frazier, a historian. This is Paul Fabrizio, a political scientist. And we are now into the fourth segment of the 14th Amendment.
Right, and we've left Section 1. We're now in Section 2.
Okay.
So now we've laid out the groundwork. You have to accept, as the message to the southern states, you have to accept your former slaves as citizens, and they have all the rights and privileges as citizens, and you got to treat them equally with whites.
This is a cudgel.
Yeah,
that was hitting Southerners with.
Yeah, that was the first part. Section 2. Representatives shall be apportioned among the several states according to their representative numbers, counting the whole number of persons in each state, excluding Indians not taxed. But when the right to vote at any election for the choice of electors for President and Vice President of the United States, representatives in Congress, the executives and judicial officers of a state, or the members of a legislature thereof, is denied to any of the male inhabitants of such states, being 21 years of age, and citizens of the United States, or in any way abridged, except for participation in rebellion or other crime.
Yeah, which we just did.
The basis of representation therein shall be reduced in the proportion which the number of such male citizens shall bear to the whole number of male citizens 21 years of age in each state. Okay. This is something... Okay.
So rebellion's mentioned in particular. So we're not talking about all you disenfranchised former rebs.
Right. We need to take this in a couple of steps. Number one, the first part of this was clearly to overturn the 3/5 person.
Yeah, 3/5, the whole 3/5 clause in the Constitution, poof, gone.
Okay. We need to make a point. Indians, not included.
Yeah, Indians non-taxed.
Native Americans were covered under a 1935 law that Congress passed.
Oh, that's good of them.
Okay. When they became subject to the income tax.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, once we can tax them, they can be citizens.
So Native Americans are in a separate category in this.
I'm feeling oppressed. I'm feeling slightly oppressed
which is an interesting thing to do. But anyway, then they have the right to vote. These new citizens, these former slaves, have the right to vote, and it can't be taken away. And
not by the states, not by anybody.
Right. And there is actually, if a state decides to take it away, they can have a reduction in their representation.
Yeah.
That's we're going to hit you on the head, and we're going to keep on hitting you on the head until you listen to us. And we're going to include a threat that we have never included before.
That's right, because in the old days, it's whatever your census population is, with slaves counting for 3/5. But now, if you're going to disenfranchise people, those disenfranchised folks do not count towards your overall representation.
Right.
So that means this is double-edged.
Yeah.
Because you've disenfranchised all these former Confederates. Now they don't count towards representation in Congress.
Yeah.
Charming.
Part
of the radical Reconstruction.
Yeah. I mean, the more I learn, the more I'm convinced about the radical part. They wanted to achieve something, and they were going to do whatever was necessary.
So slaves
to use a quote, by any means necessary.
Yeah.
To get what
slaves
they
were 3/5 for representation. Former Confederates were 0.
Right. Okay. So, South, you better do what you're going to do. Did the South do it? No.
Well, they did it for a while. They held their nose and swallowed the castor oil for a while. But what ends up happening is you run out of disenfranchised rebs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just Father Time. So now the younger brothers, the sons that have reached majority age, all of a sudden they're not bound by all this disenfranchisement, and they can start voting to try to reassert, to restore.
And to to restore their rights, to deny rights to African Americans.
They can try to restore the old South status quo.
Yeah. So this is, out of this we get literacy tests.
Yeah, absolutely.
We get poll taxes.
They find the seams and they work them. They find the gaps.
Yeah. I mean, you have this idea, it's incorrect, but you have this idea that the war settled it. And no, the fighting just continued. It continued legislatively. It continued in writing constitutions and amendments.
Physical intimidation. The gunfight at OK Corral.
I didn't know that was
The
related.
McClowrys and Clantons were all Arkansans and Texans. The Cowboys, Johnny Ringo, all those guys, and the Earp brothers were all Northerners.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So even factions and Old West shootouts could take it all the way back to the Civil War. And Frank and Jesse James claimed to only rob Yankee banks. Okay. So, just saying that this is a very complicated process, this Reconstruction. And a lot of it's pretty mean.
Yeah. Yeah, you do what we say or else you will be hurt.
That's exactly right.
That was the North, and the South responded, well, what is it? We will obey but not comply?
Obedezco pero no cumpla. Well, they were obeying and complying until they no longer had to obey.
And then they did everything they could.
Well, and that helped that, Rutherford B. Hayes tried to steal the election, but that's a whole different conversation.
Story.
Yeah,
that ended Reconstruction.
It did in Reconstruction.
Yeah,
that's what happens when you fish ballot boxes out of the swamp. But that's just a teaser. You'll have to hit the Wikipedia page for that. All right, so we're good with this one.
We're good with that, man.
And people wonder why Southerners are resentful.
Well, you wonder why they kept fighting. They just kept fighting every single time.
Kept pushing back.
They kept pushing back. The North pushed, the South responded. And this continued into our lifetime.
It continues to this day.
I mean, yeah. It's really amazing.
Well, this nation is populated by people that push back.
But we're pushing back against each other.
That's all right.
Yeah.
That's part of the creative...
A fight that began 240 years ago.
Began on day 8 of Genesis, brother.
Okay.
All right, so that's the fourth part of the 14th Amendment, and we're coming up with the fifth segment
next.